Hello, everybody. Apologies for the uh, gap in between videos. Honestly, I was just kind of lost track of things, and I could make up excuses. But I guess if you go down to the nitty gritty of why I didn't, it's probably just because I was kind of lazy, and I was like, darn it, I could do it. I kept making, kind of excuses and alibis in my head, but there was probably no genuine alibi if you look at it from a practical way. But anyway, so today's book is going to be The Glassbead Game by Hermann Hesse. I do not have a copy of it. I did have the only copy I had. I gave away because I'm so awful at buying Christmas gifts for my siblings that I basically just gave them the hardcover copy to them, so I don't have it on hand. But I might borrow it again some of these days. But yeah, there was which is probably a bit of a shame because there was a pretty beautiful cover on it that you usually don't kind of get, with certain, people don't put a lot of work, or effort or thought into the cover as one might think. So, but yeah, it's 19. I think he published the novel in 1943, though he was working on it for quite some time before that, and it's kind of described as one of his magnum opus, I think. People think, I'm inclined to think on a personal level that Steppenwolf is a little bit closer to that, and I guess people are, it's obviously each book has renders its own meaning, and you kind of have to go down to the place and the time of you were reading it. And for me, the Glassbead Game definitely registers as a second, very close second, or even kind of on the same plane. Damien's really great as well, and Narcissus and Goldman is fantastic as well. I don't know why I forgot that. But I'd say Steppenwolf, Glassbead Game, and Narcissus and Goldman were probably the two my go-to Hesse trilogy if you had to guess. And Damien and Siddhartha are kind of a little bit more. Siddhartha's told kind of a child-like, as if it's recounting very simply but not reductively to a child, and it could be understood. And that's only to teach kind of that esoteric, that not as esoteric as Damien was, because Damien was very heady, and it's a lot of German idealism and a lot of kind of I don't want to say solipsism because I feel like that's but the characters of Damien and Emile Saint Clair, I think is the main character. The kind of it's Bildungsroman, and I think this is what all of Hesse's stuff has in common, is Bildungsroman. And so yeah, that's enough of me derailing on different topics, but just trying to give a little bit of an adequate background. And Hesse, born in 1877, I think. So, he saw a lot in the time frame that he lived. He saw, the rise and fall of, Nazi Germany, and it was German writers like him, or different figures of literary figures or artistic. Him and Thomas Mann, to name a few, Thomas Mann, they all, left. They skirted out of there. I'm not sure where Hesse went to. I do know he did spend some time in Switzerland, and he was spent kind of considered his second home. But he also spent I think some time in France as well, like Paris. I know he was linked to the Cabaret Voltaire, I think, because that was the kind of the pinnacle of Dadaism. That kind of absurd, the celebration of spontaneity in art. So he was linked to that as well. So yeah, along with other different German people. But yeah, I think they all kind of they disapproved highly of Nazi Germany, which is not. I'm not trying to say that's setting the bar super high. I mean, but then again, there were people very reasonable people on the outside level, like Martin Heidegger, who just fell into it. Who, he saw something in that patriotic zeal that had something to do, that aligned with his philosophy, and something about that fit. So yeah, the Glassbead Game is a novel. It is also a Bildungsroman. It is told, and I'm always confused of how exactly to think of this novel, because it's set in the future, like it's set in like a few years, 100 years in the future, but it's not like a sci-fi book at all. Like it's not like I mean, even if you compare like the very early threads of sci-fi all the way back to like, you know, A Trip to the Moon by Lucien of Samosata, I think, like his, and that was like something like 30 AD or maybe 100 AD, I think, you know, but definitely that was, you know, like even if you think about that, like you don't think this story's told in a kind of a detached observer, third person omniscient narrator, I think, who kind of gets, you know, a deep look and an inquiry into these different characters' minds. The main character being a young man by the name of Joseph Nyecht. And I think it starts out in about his early 20s, I think. Or actually, no, all the way back to his youth. In the area of Castalia. So Castalia is like this very walled out, it's like an academy. It's like, the only other way I can think of it is like Plato's Academy, almost. Like it's this perfect, set aside, exclusive, only to the, you know, very 1% of the world can have access to it. It's very privileged, and it's essentially the place where, you know, all great minds meet. And it's, you know, like the classics are all the classic literature, and Castalia is actually a very Greek name. It's, you know, it's actually one of the, you know, I think it's Hellenistic gods, one of their areas. I think it's not, you know, I don't know if it's Elysian Fields is where it's also related to, but one of those things. And, you know, for the gods, it is very, you know, antiquated thing, but they're preserving it. And, you know, so Joseph Nyecht, which I think translates to night, like German for night, I think, is beguiled and enamored by this thing called the Glassbead game, which is also translates to Magister Ludi. And again, there's like another Latin type root word in there, I think, like magi, magister, magic, you know, spell, you know, alchemy. Lots of alchemy too. Lots of hermeticism going on too. I know Hesse was a big admirer and follower of Jung for a time, although he was kind of skeptical at first, and so that's a lot of Jung fits into this too. So you get kind of, you know, visions of, you know, you get kind of, you know, the shadow and, you know, archetypes. You get kind of integration, individuation. That's a big word that comes up. And when Joseph Nyecht learns about kind of the real, you know, purpose of this Castalia, like it's fading to him. He's kind of losing faith in this place. And it's kind of similar, and reminded me of the way that Alyosha loses a bit of faith in the brothers Karamazov, and after, you know, with Father Zosma not providing a miracle, I think. So it's kind of reminds me of that, where he's like looking to the scholars, he's looking to these, you know, all these people, but then along comes Plinio, Plinio does something. I have it written down somewhere. Plinio Designori, yes. So he shows up and kind of throws basically throws a fork in his road, because Nyecht, you know, he so long was committed and has such fealty to these, you know, all these teachers and, you know, people who taught him, you know, the Glassbead game, which, let me just explain that right now, because I find it so intriguing, for lack of a better word. But it's basically a summation of all mathematics, like it's a game that's partaken, that like the characters play, that's and kind of a rite of passage that, you know, takes all mathematics, all beauty and art, music, and I think like history and basically all, you know, the subjects and the humanities under one wing, and just basically and I can't describe it, because it's like it hits on all cylinders basically of all these different areas of knowledge, and brings them together in a cohesive, very Jungian way. Although I guess that knowledge kind of predated Jung too, like this idea, like the Socratic way, or, you know, like the idea that, you know, all these subjects and all these different ways of thinking aren't all that unalike. And I think this is something that the modern philosopher, I think Habermas, you know, German philosopher, I think, probably in the 40s and 50s, I think. He said that like this idea of, and this is just a tiny little hot take I heard on him, not actually read him yet, but he said something that I find really interesting, of all philosophy and everything to do, mathematics, subjects that we so discreetly label and categorize are actually more alike than they are different. Like, it's not, like, how many times have you read a philosophy book, hard, fast philosophy book, and then read something by, I don't know, like somebody, Hesse, for example, who incorporates a lot of philosophy in his book to the point where it's like almost like philosophical fiction? Or how many times have you heard somebody in the psychology realm reference or cross-reference philosophy or literature? So that's what I kind of like about all this idea of all knowledge kind of comprised under one thing. And this is why I think this is like Hess, like really, he's like figured out at this point. Like he's definitely, and it's told in such an almost, not an opaque way, but a kind of dispassionate way. Like he's came into his own in this, because what's intriguing me about this is that there's that word again, is that it's not told in a way that's very beautiful or poetic. Even it's poetic at some points, but it's very like kind of like the prose is very kind of laxed and kind of clinical, like in some fashion. It's told like kind of like a detached narrator. It's kind of like just a fly on the wall, just kind of like, and then Joseph Nyacht in his 24th year came to realize that this and that. It's told in this kind of in one tone throughout the whole thing. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I just think that's especially later on the novel, when Joseph Nyacht, it basically takes like the whole entire point of his life, and differs in the sense that Damien, for example, was a similar thing with the main character in that, where he meets certain influential people or role models that he looks after and looks up to, and different awakenings, different, and then it ends right at the start of World War I think, when near the end, spoilers, when Damien is like seen with a rifle over his shoulder, and he's in a military uniform, and he's heading off to war. So yeah, that's like, and then Steppenwolf is like I it's like takes place right in the Great Depression, I think, like late 20s, and it's like you think of a novel in a time, a piece of art, like the artist I think has two. This is something Jung I think taps into as well. Has like two main sides to them, like the side that is very privy and like informed by their time, like they are answerable, and they I don't know, they abide in, I guess, like the rules and the things of their time, and their culture, and they're like, ooh, like I'm aware of the things. They have their finger on the pulse to an extent, even to like an admirable extent. Like in Nietzsche's case, like he knew a lot of what was going along with, like the Wagnerian, like that type of thing. Like he was aware of all the German, that German great spirit of a artistic spirit, the Übermensch. Like that's what he kind of thought. It would be Goethe, it would be someone like that. Obviously he had a falling out with Wagner later, but then he had this other side that was like very just like himself, like guarded, secluded, carving out a piece of of his own freedom. Like he's trying to, like, in the sense that Hesse too is also very influenced by Nietzsche as well. He had an awakening where he read Nietzsche and was and just interesting to think that he would have been like, Nietzsche would have been confined to a insane asylum in the last 10 years of his life. So there's certain things back to those two sides to a person, like someone who's very in tune with the culture, but also very inimitable, and they have like their own unique, like it's almost timeless. Like it's like you can't put a finger on anything they're doing. It's like so timeless, and that's what I think Hesse is kind of had. He was influenced a lot by the culture, yes, but he was also he was a part of the Dadaist group. Like I said, he was a part. He was a poet. He was there's a part like that same German spirit of, art was, but like I think there's a part that had to transcend, and like the part to be truly, and that's where he does with Steppenwolf, or I'm sorry, yeah, Steppenwolf too, but Siddhartha was gonna, I think, describes what I'm getting at a little bit easier or more adequately, because there's this part that I think of everyone that's instilled in us. Like I think this is the archetype part, like the part where we are in everything we learn, and this, I guess this depends on whether you think we're a blank slate or not, tabula rasa or not, but everything you learn in culture and like religious and this and that, it comes back, like you live it out in ways that you didn't imagine, like in ways like, for example, if you're raised like a Catholic, you at first you might reject it later in life, and by the time you come across like maybe atheism, and maybe you become an agnostic or whatever, and you just fall out of it, you have a falling out, and basically later on in life, before you know it, like you're unconsciously living out Catholicism, and you're like, or you're longing for that same sense of meaning and routine, I think. And there's so yeah, that's what I think the character of Joseph Niet is exemplified. Like people have said that the character's a little bit one-dimensional, and I don't disagree. I mean, it has been a couple of years, but I do remember his character being described as as just trying to find the truth. I think just trying to find that, what is the truth, like. And he's, he goes through phases where he's in certain circles and, certain things with the Glassbead game, and he's, completely just regaled and, mystified by it, and he's trying to figure this out. He's, like, a part of him wants to be the best, like, in Castalia, to, it's a very competitive place. And then Plinio, like I said earlier, Designori, he comes along and kind of, like, throws him in a rut, and he's like, because he's questioning it, he's like, this is basically all just like a one big like hypocritical, like, dog and pony show. Like it's not like Castalia is not all it's cracked up to be. Like he's basically just like completely just like. And I look how well spoken Plinio is. Like he's such like a great Socratic figure. Like he's so like he just has this biting wit to him. Like he just like totally lambasts, but not without, not for no small reason, because he's points out that it's basically like Castalia is almost like an ivory tower. Like they're, sure, they can be as advanced and literary and play these games, but at the end of the day, it's like, what is it worth? Like, is it, like they've never actually been outside of this little confined area. Like they've only had this place, or they only know this place. Like if you let them out into the world, like would they have the practical knowledge, the praxis to actually operate? And that's the question he kind of brings, and that's what kind of leads Joseph Niet to kind of leave Castalia. He's done with it, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna just go on a sabbatical. Go in a place outside this place, see what the world is like outside. And again, this is very Buddhist-like, because the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, had a similar experience, as most people know. The origins of that is Buddha was lied to as a child. He was a prince. He was, very, well-off, well-to-do family, like in basically like the second, like somebody lies about, death or covers it up, and you're like, oh, what's going on with that dead body there? Like, it's like, and when people tell him the truth that people die, that people get old and die, it's like it completely floors him. But he also has an awakening. So this is like similar. What I find in what happened with Niet is that Joseph Niet is that he's lost faith, but he's also like he's kind of disillusioned with Castalia, but he's also moving onward. Like he's still, and again, there's that Jung part of where you're like kind of integrating things. You're like, this tool's good, like, like this tool is good, like Castalia's taught me some good stuff, but I've got to get out of here, and then you move on. And this is where the novel gets pretty hazy, I think. Hazy, that's the word I'm trying to describe the prose, because it's just it's not poetic and beautiful, but it's not ugly. It's kind of just I don't know how to describe it. It's like hazy. Um, but yeah, it's like it gets kind of confusing because just Niect now lives out I'm not saying this is a bad thing. All the more confusion the better, because I do really love the novel. But it's just hard to kind of describe what happens. He leaves and then he starts traveling around. I think travels around the Earth, and this is why I said it's almost like not a sci-fi. It's not like a future dystopian novel in the same sense that, say, Brave New World is, where it's like also with like Soma and Aldous Huxley talking about like kind of like what could be in the next, this is what it's more like its own thing, but it's almost like it could be, honestly, this novel could take place, it could be like Narcissus and Goldman and back to medieval times. But I like that about Hesse, is that a lot of these novels, like, he's not beholden to one time period. He's just kind of like, like anybody can read it. Doesn't matter if you're German, doesn't matter if you're this or that, or 200 years in the future. So yeah, or 5 or 100 years, or however long it is. Anyway, so Nyecht goes about. He this is where kind of it gets like really Jungian, like almost proto Jungian, in the sense that Nyecht is trying to find out all these different aspects of himself, and he's goes out, and then he realizes that Castalia with its ivory tower is not for him, so he goes from that, and then he goes to maybe about in his 30s, he starts taking on the role of a rainmaker, I think. And this is basically, somebody who goes out and is a very kind of not rambunctious necessarily, not maybe, but it might have that kind of connotation, maybe like buccaneer, maybe like travelers type, like on their feet, very just from one country to the next, like just like just see the world, experience, aesthetic, something maybe Kierkegaard and either or might have described something along the lines of the aesthetic life, of the Don John, not in the sense that it's a negative thing of just, wanting to constantly have hedonistic relationships, and to be promiscuous in general, but, on all levels, I think, of the sensory world of just seeing new things, and he takes that life on, and he tries that out. But then he realizes he's kind of like the same type of dissatisfaction. It's not like it's more like dissatisfaction. It's more like it leaves him like it doesn't leave him as gratified as he thinks. Like, it's like, well, if I just keep going from this one hedonic adventure to the next, there's going to be peaks and valleys, and there's going to be all sorts of nice adventures, and it's going to be all nice, but I'm just going to be like, it's not teaching me anything. So I think from there he goes to the priestly life, and then he starts to learn about the I can't remember what part. It was like the rainmaker, then kind of the more priestly monk life. He lives like a monk. He abstains from everything, and then I think from this he realizes like it's the same thing. Like, but too much abstention, like Siddhartha realizes, like too much of it is like just leaves you kind of again that kind of wanting type of thing. And it's like, and the thing that I found so like wonderful about this type of thought is that it's so true to life and how people's lives unfold. Mine, for example, or anybody's. I think like even like the most ambitious kind of one-track mind people I've known, like, have things in life where they'll have a time in their life where they'll just start traveling really crazily. They'll just they'll just go see the world, and it'll be like, but then like I have people I know who say they went to see the world, and then they've went into that kind of Don John type of life, and they just felt like empty, and they're just like, okay, well, maybe that's not the thing at all. Maybe it's not just about going out and partying and going to clubs and stuff like that. Maybe it's just about going home and having a nice nest and a business. And that's just like, and then like again, it's like this total, not apathy, but it's just like a longing for something, the next big thing. And it's like, well, maybe that's not good. And then you get impatient again, and it's just like, and I guess it depends on your type of personality, type of proclivities, but this is the type of thing I feel I know I can relate to, is this kind of like, I've never been personally driven by money, but it's been in the back of my mind to just want to be kind of ambitious, like the next big thing. Like I want to write, like books, I want to do music, I want to do this thing, I want to kind of like put all that out there. And then but then I'm kind of left you know, feeling kind of like unsated by it. Like it's not the type of thing. So I'm longing for something spiritual. You try meditation, and it's like this helps out, but there's something, you know. It's like people's lives aren't this flat arc. For example, that's certainly true. Or neither is it even. This is why I have some problems with the hero's journey thing. It's just because it's like, and then this and this, and it's good on some levels. Like, yeah, sure, there's a rising action, or yeah, there's a conclusion, there's a falling action, and, you know, call to action, you know, slay the dragon, like all of that. You see a lot, you know. It's I think there's something to it that you see it a lot in Hollywood movies, or just stories in general, narratives across the board. But mainly, I think like people's lives are even more kind of disparate, and kind of like you see these different gaps in trying out different things, and that's what Nyecht Joseph experiences. He like, sure, there's a call to action maybe, but it's more like long kind of meditations on himself and the development of his, you know, his personality, and how he gets, you know, how he's using things. It's not about one is better than the other. It's just that people go through different phases in different parts of their life, and like he goes through, you know, certain parts where he's like, I'm learning so much. Maybe this is going to be the thing for me, and it's like maybe this area where I'm just like packed with knowledge in Castalia, but then he longs to the outside. It's like the second Plinio kind of does the trickster type of archetype and kind of like cajoles him out of that, and he's like, why don't you, you know, I don't know, like, is Castalia even that great after all? And he's like, I don't know, it's like, maybe it isn't. So then, yeah, it's just, I find that fascinating, because it is so true to what human nature is. Like, you see, you know, time and time, this archetype of how, and I can't exactly describe it, but it's, you know, it's a inclination we all have to figure out like what we're best fit in, like in, you know, and kind of push pull to certain things. And it could be like religion, it could be this, and I think like this is why a lot of people kind of fester or kind of fetter themselves to one ideology, is because they find it freeing in a way, because they're like, man, there's so many different things. It's like, should I become an entrepreneur? Should I have a hustle or a side hustle? Should I be doing this? Should I do this and do this? Should I, you know, write my book? Should I get super educated? Should I become an artist? What should I do? And it's like all these different lifestyles all appeal, and like, you know, there's so many of them that like at the end of the day, it's like actually appealing to have one dogma of like, it could be religion. It's like, well, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just an observation, but it's just, you know, it's a level of comfort where you're just like, it does end all kind of other options if you just kind of just stick with one thing and one ideology. And it's like, and that's what kind of makes certain things like totalitarianism too, not to get on a political note, but, you know, that makes totalitarianism appealing, because it delineates, or it acts as if it has the everything figured out. Like, well, I'll rope in with this charismatic guy over here, because I don't have anything, because I know if I keep living my life like I am, going from one thing to the other, like wayward, drifting, then I'm not gonna ever find truth. So that's why I'm going with this culty type guy. It doesn't have to be that bad, but, you know, just some examples. So yeah, the Glassbead Game by Hermann Hesse. Yeah, as far as I remember, that's how it ends, I think. That, you know, he lives out those 4 lives, like which are basically add up to the Jungian psychological types, you know, the 4 types of intuition and sensing and feeling and thinking. Like, those aren't just like kind of you know, Adam Ruins Everything did a thing on it. I think Adam Conover's name did a little wry thing on it, saying like, like Jung probably thought like, because his wife is feely and all that, she's a feeler because she's like complains too much, or because men typically are thinkers. Like, that's not what it's about at all. It's not about the feminine being better, the masculine being better, the feminine being like chaotic and this and that. Which is why I think people have it touches with Jordan Peterson too, because he kind of, I think, overly stresses that too much, I think. And I think like it's, you know, not trying to get into that, into unfurrowed grounds here, but I think it's a little bit more dispassionate than that. And yeah, so like Joseph Miecki lives out these basically all four aspects of it, like a personality, and I think the times he lives in kind of earns that. I think he's able to, offers the chance to be able to do that, I think. I'm not sure exactly how he goes about doing this, but it's, all four main, chunks of his personality, like the quadra type thing, So he lives, kind of to see all, like, how those would play out, and I find that really interesting. So, yeah, so, the Glassbead game by Hermann Hesse, definitely recommend it. I'd like to review Narcissus and Goldman pretty soon, because that's probably one of my other all-time favorites by him. More Jungian psychology in that, too. And, yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.